So in 2000, Ulm agreed to organize a conference at MIT. I was delighted by that. And we thought it would be another, what would be sixth ReLAM conference on Creep. The first one was number 4, of course. So anyway, so that's how we counted. And everything seemed fine, and suddenly we received, as organizer, received a letter from ReLAM. Conference will be not MIT, it will be at the ReLAM Annual Week in Paris, simultaneously. And although we had high esteem of ReLAM and everything, we just revolted. Apparently they did not come with the agreement of ReLAM president. There was some deal of some administrator, this idea. But it was an order. So we decided, no way. We decided we will separate and form a separate society called International Association of Concreep in Concrete Creep and so forth. So now it was very important that Volker Wittmann came on our side, totally. And he was very influential in ReLAM. He was future president of ReLAM, of course. And some others too. So it was an administrative decision, unnecessary controversy, and eventually accepted to it. An conference was organized at MIT in September 2001. It was under the auspices of ReLAM, but clearly we held a meeting there of all the participants, proposed that we as the participants organize Concreep. The meeting was held. Of course it went well, people liked the idea, and it was approved. At that conference, Ulm was designated as the interim president for the duration of the conference, for the 4 days. And they elected me at that time as the first president for half of the term, because term normally ends at the conference, and the second president, Wittmann, as the second half of the term, up to the following conference. That conference then was my big desire, and everybody agreed, was in honor of Powers, who died a few years before. His daughter came. That was quite moving. She spoke about him, and we had a tribute to him there, explained his work. So that was another memorable, a very deserving aspect of that conference, because he did not receive the esteem and approval that belonged to him during his life, at the end of his life. At that time, the first time came in physical aspects, discussion of molecular mechanism, similar aspects again, but in this relationship. First time we discussed actually also in Barcelona before, but more randomness of creep. Phenomenon analysis was big, not here, but also it came up, of course, in Barcelona before, many aspects. And then after the conference there was a little pause. Nobody was perhaps willing to put the effort. Eventually Pijaudier, who also one of my very esteemed collaborators and actually my student from Northwestern, he at that time moved from Paris, professor, he moved as department chairman to Nantes, University of Nantes in France. He organized a conference. It was wonderful, very nice town. It was marked by discussions of, to my knowledge, of maybe thermal aspects, of course physical aspects of creep, of the mathematical modeling. Jennings made a great lecture on microscopic aspects of observations in his environmental electron microscope in Northwestern University. I thought it was an outstanding conference. And that was now the first conference which came as Concreep 7 in Nantes, still under the auspices of ReLAM. The next conference was organized, and that was already decided in Nantes. We thought diversify the position locations, so we thought it should be in Asia, and Tanabe from University of Kyoto, Professor Tanabe agreed to organize it in Japan, and it was actually held not in Kyoto. No, sorry, it was in Nagoya, right? Okay, sorry. Nagoya organized it in Izeshima. There's a little known place. It's a wonderful resort at the peninsula sticking out in the middle of Japan island out into the sea in September, but the weather was not too good, which was probably good because people stayed at the conference. It was raining. A nice ride, long, by a little train with a few cars only. We gathered there, and that conference Izeshima was, which year was it? That was in 2008, I think, 2008, right. So that was where first time the big evidence came up from bridge deflections, excessive bridge deflections. And that was perhaps the biggest topic of the conference. There was a separate session organized by it. That main evidence came from the bridge in Palau. That bridge was built in 1977 in Palau, connecting two islands, and it deflected by 1.61 meter, span 241 meters, the largest span in the world for that kind of box girder, without cables. Still not exceeded that span by, the biggest now is 250 meters, I think. It deflected so much that they had to close it. Then made a remedial pre-stressing and lifted it by 1.6 meter. And it was put in service, and 3 months after that it collapsed. So that's actually is interesting in two ways. One is of course mechanics of failure, which of course involves side effect, but mainly if it didn't deflect, it would have never happened. So the data, of course, was litigated. It was litigated at court in Sacramento. I didn't know that our vice-general Ressner actually was the principal expert, that company, the litigation, and the data were sealed in perpetuity. So the only thing that was known from newspapers, from people who came to observe it. I didn't know about it either, but I did learn about it eventually, and I thought it was incredible. And I had the fortune of having one of the principal lectures at the World Congress of Structural Engineers. And at that lecture I argued and proposed a resolution that it is unethical for an engineer to approve to sealing of data, and specifically the data should be released for the bridge of Palau. So that resolution came up, and it was sent to the judge in Sacramento. It turned out he never knew there was anything unethical. The lawyers didn't tell him. He thought it was all right to seal it. So data were released. Released through his general Ressner, who had them in Chicago, all the data, but they were under, of course, legal constraints that they could not reveal it. So we got them, we analyzed them, and it came up, contrary to the evidence at the court, what I heard, I didn't see it, this is what I heard, that the problem was not some quality control and poor mix and I don't know, all these things. The main cause was a wrong code recommendation. They followed ACR recommendation and European CEB at that time. Both were wrong, especially for long times. And the predictions, if you put them in Parliament code, misjudged the long-term deflections by 5 to 1. Enormous. So then, and that was discussed at the conference. We got a group together, I already I discussed there, but we formed a RILEM committee on multi-decade creep, and with their help and other people, eventually after the conference organized a database of now 71 bridges which deflected excessively. None of the others killed people, unlike Palau, but some of them collapsed without causing any loss of life. Most of them were just closed. Some were lifted successively. Many were rebuilt, and that was a major effect, which is now reverberating in Europe. They already changed the code, partially accepting the idea proposed at Northwest in 1974 that creep is logarithmic creep long term, so it's European code already, huge change. And it's apparently coming in also ACI Committee 209, although it's still not formalized into a guide. So that changed the field, and this analysis of data was a big argument of discussion. Another, and that was coming from previous conferences, was drying creep. Now the drying creep is an interesting phenomenon which involves diffusion, thermodynamics, cracking, fracturing and so forth. At that time it was finally shown by some experiments of Yunpeng Shi at Northwestern that it is not caused only by cracking, namely the drying creep was propagated by many people with Montu, and that we define creep by difference between load-free and loaded specimens. A load-free one is shrinkage. Shrinkage induces cracking, and cracking diminishes deformation, which is not seen in loaded specimens which don't have any cracking. So it's some contribution. But I always suspected, and of course some people with me too, that there is a strong source on the molecular level, and these experiments at that time discussed at the conference showed that actually there must be, although explanation was not clear. That came only by molecular dynamic simulations, Ketan with me at Northwestern 2 years ago, that it is indeed so. So this drying creep was a persistent problem over many conferences, almost from the beginning, certainly from the Northwestern Conference 1976, and I think it is getting close to complete resolution. The next conference, and that was really a milestone, was again at MIT. Many people asked him, and he was willing to organize it again at MIT in 2013. And that was the first conference. The attendance was completely different, not just civil engineers. There are many physicists and physical chemists, and people who look microscopy. That was half the conference. And there was lots of evidence on the microstructure level. First time they were presented many theories on the mechanism of creep in the microstructural way. It was, I would say, a revolution. It was a new era started then. What was well, of course, what was discussed also tall buildings. There was also previous conferences concerned about we switched from steel to concrete, so obviously creep is an important question. Nuclear reactors were out, so for the last few conferences. That was the biggest thing before. But anyway, the conference was successful and so much excitement. It was also decided to organize a next conference soon. And the next conference, which was Concreep 10, was MIT was Concreep 9, was organized in Vienna 2 years later, 2015 in September, organized by Helmich. And again, same, many physicists and chemists came, and there was this dialogue, civil engineers and chemists, and I think now finally complete mathematical models are presented, discussed. Also much more statistics is coming in, which is impossible, which was not possible before, statistical evaluations, and that's where we are today, and we are looking forward to next conference. The designated next organizer, and of course president of AYA Concreep is my colleague Gianluca Cusatis, and he will hold the conference Concreep 2011 at our university at Northwestern in 2020, only 2 years from now. So we are looking forward. There will be another great conference which will bring together civil engineering, mechanics, mathematics, physics, chemistry, and all that together.